There is a category of outdoor space that most gardening advice completely ignores. Not the quarter-acre backyard with raised beds and established borders. Not the suburban front yard with space for foundation plantings and specimen trees. The patio, the balcony, the front stoop, the small concrete courtyard behind the townhouse. The outdoor spaces that tens of millions of Americans actually have. The spaces that most gardening books, most garden center displays, and most gardening videos treat as secondary concerns at best, and afterthoughts at worst. These spaces are not afterthoughts. They are the outdoor living areas that most urban and suburban Americans actually use every day. The place where morning coffee happens, where evening conversations take place, where summer meals are eaten, where the line between inside and outside becomes pleasantly blurred on warm evenings. And the difference between a patio that feels like an extension of a well-considered home and a patio that feels like an afterthought is almost entirely determined by the plants in the containers sitting on it. The right plants in the right containers create outdoor spaces that look designed, that feel lush and intentional, that make the small outdoor area feel like the most valuable square footage in the property. The wrong plants, or no plants at all, leave the space looking like what it is without them, concrete with furniture. 11 plants are on this list. Every one of them thrives in containers. Every one of them creates an impression of sophistication and investment that far exceeds its cost. And stay until the very end, because the 11th plant on this list is the one that creates the most dramatic container display available in American horticulture from one of the smallest, least expensive plants on the list. That plant is coming. Stay for it. Plant 1, elephant ear, alocasia and colocasia, the tropical statement. Nothing communicates this outdoor space was designed by someone who knows what they are doing, faster than a large elephant ear plant in a beautiful container. The leaves of alocasia and colocasia, those massive, architectural, sculptural forms in deep green, black, purple, and variegated patterns, create a visual presence so dramatic and so clearly intentional that they immediately elevate every other element in the outdoor space around them. A single well-grown elephant ear in a large glazed ceramic container on a patio creates the kind of statement that most homeowners assume requires a professional designer and a significant budget to achieve. It requires a $30 plant in a $50 pot. The cultural simplicity of elephant ears in containers is what makes them so valuable for the gardener who wants maximum visual impact with minimum ongoing attention. They want heat. They want water. They want fertilizer every few weeks through the growing season. Within those simple parameters, which translate in practice to regular watering, monthly feeding, and a sunny location, elephant ears in containers grow with a vigor and a speed that most ornamental plants cannot approach. A small elephant ear purchased in May reaches impressive size by July and spectacular size by August, when the massive leaves are at their most dramatic and the tropical character of the plant is at its most compelling. The variety selection within elephant ears is extensive, enough that container gardeners can choose between the giant, classic forms, Colocasia esculenta in its standard green and the black-leaved Black Magic selection, and the more refined, architecturally distinctive alocasia varieties including Polly, with its dramatic dark green arrow-shaped leaves with white veining, and Regal Shield with its enormous purple-green leaves that create an almost iridescent effect in strong light. In zones 8 through 11, elephant ears can be left in containers outdoors year-round. In colder climates, the containers move indoors before frost, or the corms are lifted and stored through winter and replanted in spring, a 15-minute annual task that preserves a plant that will be significantly larger the following season. Plant 2, Mandevilla, the climbing color machine Mandevilla, is the container plant that most people encounter for the first time on the patio or balcony of a restaurant or hotel and immediately want to know the name of. The large trumpet-shaped flowers in vivid pink, red, white, and coral that open continuously from June through October on twining stems that can be trained up a trellis, wound around an obelisk, or allowed to cascade from a hanging container, create a display so abundant and so continuously refreshed that the plant never looks tired or past its peak. While other summer annuals exhaust themselves by midsummer, Mandevilla is producing new buds at the same rate in October as it was in June, providing the full season continuity that most container plantings cannot sustain. The glossy, Dark green foliage that underlies the flower display contributes as much to the expensive appearance of a mandevilla planting as the flowers themselves. Unlike the somewhat coarse, unremarkable foliage of most summer annuals, mandevilla leaves are rich, deep, and visually substantial, the kind of foliage that would be worth growing even without the flower contribution. In combination with the large, vivid blooms that open continuously above that glossy green background, mandevilla creates a container display that reads at every scale, from the close-up encounter with individual flowers to the impression the whole plant makes from across the outdoor space. In zones 9 through 11, mandevilla is a perennial vine that overwinters outdoors and returns every spring with increasing vigor. In cooler climates, it is grown as a tender annual or overwintered indoors as a container plant in a bright, cool location, cut back by half before bringing inside, reduced watering through winter, and returned to its outdoor position in late spring when temperatures reliably stay above 50 degrees at night. The overwintered mandevilla that returns to its summer position in May is a significantly more substantial plant than the new purchase would be, and it typically achieves its peak display size several weeks earlier in the season. Plant 3, Cannas, the bold tropical drama canna. Lilies in containers make a statement that no other summer container plant can match for sheer visual boldness. The upright architectural form, bold strap-like foliage in green, bronze, burgundy, and variegated striped patterns rising to 4 to 6 feet, topped by vivid flowers in red, orange, yellow, pink, and bicolor combinations, creates a vertical drama in container plantings that fills outdoor spaces with a tropical energy that transforms the character of the space around it. A trio of cannas in a large container at the corner of a patio creates a living privacy screen that is simultaneously functional and spectacular, providing both the visual boundary the space needs and a flower display that continues without interruption through the entire summer. The ease with which cannas perform in containers is what makes them so valuable for the time-limited gardener who wants exceptional results. They require sun, water, and regular fertilization, the same inputs that most container plants need. And in return, they produce one of the most vigorous, most abundant, and most visually impressive summer displays available in container horticulture. Canna rhizomes planted in spring in large containers emerge quickly in warm temperatures, develop rapidly through summer, and reach their full impressive height and bloom production by midsummer. The container that looked modest in May is a dramatic tropical statement by July. The variety selection within cannas extends the design possibilities of this plant far beyond the bright-colored Victorian bedding plant that most Americans picture when they hear the name. Tropicana is the selection that has done the most to update the canna's design reputation. Its spectacular striped foliage in orange, red, yellow, and green provides ornamental value that rivals any flowering plant, and the orange flowers that appear above it extend the color theme through the summer. Stuttgart produces an extraordinary, variegated foliage in green and white that reads as cool and sophisticated rather than bold and tropical, a completely different design character from the same genus. Black Knight provides the deepest burgundy black foliage available in the genus, creating a dramatic dark anchor in container combinations. Plant 4, Caladium, the shade solution. Caladium is the container plant that solves the problem that defeats most container gardeners who have north-facing balconies, covered patios, or any outdoor space that receives less than 4 hours of direct sun. Most spectacular container plants require full sun for their best performance, and the container gardener with a shaded outdoor space is left with a short list of alternatives that rarely produce the visual impact that the space deserves. Caladium fills this gap with a foliage display so extraordinary in color and pattern that it creates more visual interest in 4 hours of indirect light than most sun-loving plants produce in 8 hours of full exposure. The heart-shaped leaves of caladium come in color combinations that most people initially assume are painted rather than grown. Pure white with green veins, deep rose pink with dark margins, red with white spots, green with pink centers, near black with contrasting white ribs. These are not subtle variations on a basic leaf color. They are dramatic, saturated, clearly intentional color statements that read across the outdoor space and create immediate visual impact. A grouping of 3 caladium containers in complementary color selections on a shaded porch creates a display that most visitors comment on within moments of arriving. Caladium tubers planted in containers in late spring emerge and develop rapidly in warm temperatures, reaching their full impressive foliage size by midsummer and maintaining that display continuously through fall until temperatures drop below 60 degrees. Unlike many shade-tolerant plants that grow slowly and modestly, caladium grows with the enthusiasm of a sun-loving annual, producing large, overlapping leaves that fill the container with color in a matter of weeks. In zones 9 through 11, caladium tubers left in containers outdoors over winter and return the following season. In cooler climates, the tubers are lifted before frost and stored through winter in a cool, dry location, a simple annual operation that preserves plants that become larger and more impressive each season they are grown. Here is the moment in this list to say something directly to the gardeners who have dismissed containers, gardening as a lesser version of real gardening, who have the balcony, the patio, the small outdoor space, and have not invested in making it extraordinary because they assume that extraordinary outdoor spaces require ground space and the kind of established garden that takes years to build. Every plant on this list grows in a container. Every one of them can make a small outdoor space look like the most considered and intentional part of the property. Drop a U.S. state or hardiness zone in the comments right now, because container gardeners in the same climate watching this video are making the same decisions about the same plants for the same spaces. Plant 5, lantana, the pollinator magnet. That never stops lantana is the summer container plant that most experienced gardeners eventually reach, after years of replacing tired annuals in midsummer, after discovering that most container flowers lose their visual appeal in the heat and drought that July and August bring, after finding that the plant that looked promising in May often looks exhausted by August. Lantana does not look exhausted in August. Lantana looks its best in August, precisely because the combination of heat, sun, and reduced water that defeats most summer containers is the combination of conditions that lantana evolved to thrive in. It is not tolerating summer heat. It is performing in it. The butterfly and hummingbird activity that a mature lantana container generates through the summer is the kind of garden animation that most container gardeners have never experienced from their balcony or patio plants. Swallowtails, monarchs, fritillaries, and painted ladies treat lantana as a primary summer feeding destination, visiting the flower clusters repeatedly through the day and creating a visual activity around the container that makes the outdoor space feel connected to something larger than itself. A lantana container on a balcony that generates regular monarch butterfly visits through August is a balcony that residents spend more time on, that guests linger at, and that creates the kind of living garden experience that most balcony containers never achieve. The color-changing characteristic of lantana flowers, which open in one color and age through a second, and sometimes a third color on the same flower cluster, creating multicolored effects that no single color annual can replicate, adds a visual complexity to lantana containers that makes them interesting at close range in a way that most summer annuals are not. The individual flower clusters that appear to contain 3 or 4 colors simultaneously are the product of the flower's natural aging process, and the result is a container that looks more carefully designed than any single color planting can achieve without any additional design effort from the gardener. Plant 6, sweet potato vine, the spiller that transforms combination sweet potato vine, Ipomoea, Batata's ornamental varieties, is the plant that professional container designers use to transform competent container arrangements into spectacular ones. And understanding how it works is the single piece of container design knowledge that produces the most significant improvement in container appearance for the least additional investment. The trailing stems that cascade over the edge of the container and continue growing downward, sometimes reaching 2 to 3 feet of trailing length by midsummer, soften the hard edge between the container and the surrounding space in a way that makes the entire arrangement look more natural, more generous, and more designed simultaneously. The foliage colors available in ornamental sweet potato vine cover a range that allows the plant to complement almost any container combination. Blackie provides the deepest, most dramatic near-black burgundy-purple foliage available in any trailing annual, creating a dark anchor in containers that makes brighter flower colors above it look more vivid by contrast. Marguerite provides chartreuse yellow foliage that functions as the great connector, the color that makes every other color in the combination look richer and more intentional. Tricolor provides a variegated green, pink and white foliage that adds pattern and texture to combinations. Where solid colors feel monotonous, the vigorous growth of ornamental sweet potato vine, it can produce 2 to 3 feet of new stem. Growth per week in peak summer heat means that container planted with sweet potato vine in May is a dramatically different-looking container by July, with cascading trails that soften and extend the container's presence far beyond its physical dimensions. For the container gardener who wants their pots to look lush and abundant rather than neatly contained, sweet potato vine provides the generous overflow that transforms container arrangements from tidy to spectacular. Plant 7. Calibrachoa, the Million Bells. Effect Calibrachoa, commonly sold as Million Bells, produces a flower display of such continuous abundance and such cheerful generosity that the container it occupies reads, from any distance, as one of the most productive flowering plants available in any format. The tiny petunia-like flowers that cover the plant so completely that the foliage beneath becomes invisible in peak bloom periods create the impression of a hobdiome waterfall of color cascading over the container edge, an effect so abundant and so complete that most observers assume the display requires regular deadheading and careful management to maintain. It requires neither. Calibrachoa is self-cleaning, meaning the spent flowers fall away naturally and are replaced continuously by new buds without any intervention from the gardener. The color range available in Calibrachoa extends through the full warm and cool spectrum, from the deepest burgundy and violet through every shade of pink, red, orange, yellow, and white, including bicolors and the distinctive Super Bells series that has introduced patterns including stripes and star centers that no previous Calibrachoa generation offered. The container gardener who fills a single large hanging basket with a single Calibrachoa variety is creating a color statement that persists from planting through first frost without deadheading, without replacing exhausted plants, and without any of the midsummer replanting that most annual container gardens require. Plant 8. Geranium, the classic that earns its status. Pelargonium, the tender geranium that has been the backbone of container gardening on American porches and patios for generations, earns its classic status through a combination of qualities that most newer container introductions cannot match. Heat tolerance that allows it to perform through the most challenging weeks of the American summer without visible stress. Drought tolerance that forgives the occasional mist watering that defeats more finicky container plants. And a flower color range that includes the truest, most vivid scarlets and corals available in any container annual. The ivy geranium, Pelargonium peltatum, extends the classic geranium's contribution to container gardening by adding a cascading habit that combines the flower production of the zonal geranium with the trailing growth form that makes it ideal for the edge of elevated containers, window boxes, and hanging baskets. The combination of an upright red zonal geranium at the center of a window box with trailing ivy, geraniums in coral and white cascading over the edges, is a container arrangement that has appeared on American homes for generations because it works reliably, continuously, and with the traditional charm that some outdoor spaces require and that no amount of trendy new plant introductions can replicate. Plant 9. Scaevola. The underused cascader Scaevola Iamula fanflower is the container plant that experienced container gardeners use when they want Calibrachoa level continuous bloom in a trailing plant with a more sophisticated color palette and a less conventional flower form. The unusual fan-shaped flowers, half-flowers technically, with all 5 petals on one side of the center, come in shades of blue, purple, lavender, pink, and white that fill a color range not well represented by most summer annuals, and they open continuously from planting through first frost without any deadheading or grooming. The trailing stems that develop through the season create the same cascading effect as sweet potato vine and Calibrachoa, but in a plant that is simultaneously producing the blue-purple flower, contribution that most summer container combinations lack. The heat and drought tolerance of Scaevola thus get evolved in the coastal regions of Australia, where heat, wind, and periodic drought are standard conditions, makes it one of the most reliable performers in the difficult conditions of exposed balconies, south and west-facing patios, and any container situation where heat accumulates and water evaporates rapidly. A scaevola planted in a challenging hot, dry container position that would defeat calabrachoa or sweet potato. Vine will continue producing its fan-shaped flowers through August and September. With the same generosity it showed in June, the Australian coastal heritage of the plant is expressed as practical resilience in exactly the conditions that most container plants find most challenging. Plant 10. Fiber optic grass, the unexpected texture isolepis. Chernua fiber optic grass, sometimes sold as bulrush or cloudgrass, is the container plant that most people encounter in a sophisticated container arrangement and cannot initially identify as a grass. The thread-fine stems that arch outward from the plant's center, each tipped with a tiny white or brown flower head that catches light and gives the plant its common name, create a texture so delicate and so unlike anything else in the container palette that the plant reads as an exotic, unusual selection regardless of how readily available it actually is. In combination with bold-leaved plants like elephant ears or cannas, fiber optic grass provides the textural contrast that makes the bold plants look bolder, the fine against the coarse, the delicate against the dramatic, the quiet against the spectacular. Fiber optic grass performs best in consistently moist conditions, which makes it one of the few container plants that actively benefits from the regular, generous watering schedule that most container gardens require. In a container that receives reliable moisture or on a drip irrigation system beside a frequently used water source in a rain-exposed location, fiber optic grass grows with elegant ease and produces its delicate animated effect through the entire season. The stems that nod and ripple with any air movement add the movement dimension to container arrangements that most stationary plants cannot provide. Plant 11, the one that creates. The most dramatic display from the smallest plant, Bacopa, the waterfall of white. This is the plant that was promised at the beginning of this video. Bacopa Sutura cordata is a plant that most people walk past in the garden center without a second look because the small, unremarkable trailing stems covered in tiny white or pink flowers communicate nothing at retail scale about what this plant is capable of by midsummer in a container situation. A Bacopa plant in a 4-inch pot in May is one of the least impressive plants available at any garden center. The same plant in a large container by August is a waterfall of continuous white bloom so complete and so abundant that the entire container seems to be made of flowers rather than foliage, and the foliage beneath is effectively invisible beneath the bloom coverage. The specific quality that makes Bacopa the nuclear option on this list is not just the abundance of the bloom, it is the combination of abundance with continuity and with the white color that functions in container design as lavender does in landscape design. The great connector that makes every color surrounding it look more vivid, more saturated, and more intentional. A container combination that seems ordinary without Bacopa becomes extraordinary with it, because the constant white cascade that flows from the Bacopa's trailing stems creates a visual baseline that elevates everything above it. Container designers who know this use Bacopa in almost every arrangement, not as the star, but as the element that makes every other plant in the combination look like a star, the self-cleaning, characteristic of Bacopa, the spent flowers, that fall away without intervention and are continuously replaced by new buds at the same abundant rate, makes it one of the most genuinely low-maintenance container plants, available despite the extraordinary scale of its flower production. No deadheading, no replacing exhausted plants in midsummer, no intervention of any kind between planting and first frost beyond the regular watering and feeding that every container plant requires. The outdoor space that has Bacopa in its container combinations is a space that looks like someone is paying significant attention to it at all times, without anyone actually doing anything other than watering regularly. 11 plants. 11 ways to transform a patio, a balcony, a small courtyard, or any outdoor space without ground, without established borders, and without the years of patient gardening that traditional garden development requires. The right plants in the right containers, placed with intention in the spaces where life actually happens outdoors, produce exactly the impression of design, investment, and consideration that makes outdoor spaces worth spending time in. Every one of these plants is available at garden centers right now. The outdoor space that deserves better than concrete with furniture is one decision away. If this video helped, hit subscribe to join this gardening community and watch the next video on screen to keep building the outdoor spaces that make every season worth being outside.